Excellent. Yes, it is I, the conspicuous moo, and I have a problem. But in order to get this problem across, I need to tell you a story. Now, once upon a time, when Shadowlands was very, very little, a person high up in the Blizzard hierarchy decided to go on a Mythic Plus pug run. And obviously, it didn't go very well. I'm going to guess Shrine of the Storm because that place is dreadful. And yea, at the end of said run, after the timer was failed and they all rage quit in disgust, the AoE cap was born. First of all, let's go over what we're talking about here. So, Blizzard have decided that they're a bit worried about the way dungeons are being run, and so they have started to institute target caps for various different specs, not across the board. Only particular ones are going to be lucky enough to be capped at how much damage they can do. Now, there are several different ways of capping damage. Soft capping, for example, is usually soft capped at about 20 targets. The damage itself is capped, but not the amount that you hit. A lot of abilities are soft capped like this, and you know, it's not usually too much of a problem. Problem ones are hard caps. Now, the hard caps have no room to maneuver at all. It will say so on the tooltip, usually, although Blizzard's track record with tooltips is not tremendous, and there are still a number of abilities that brewmasters have, and they don't have tooltips that reflect that hard cap. But basically, you know, if you're hard capped to 5, it is what it says on the tin. You can only hit 5 targets, and if there are 7 mobs in there, then you won't hit the other 2 at all. The third one, which is being introduced, is, well, I call it the squirt. It's the square root scaling. So basically, I mean, there's a whole formula behind it. I think basically if you attack more than one mob, every subsequent mob will have slightly less damage. And it goes down by a factor of, I think, 1 over the square root of how many mobs you're fighting. So, so you will be doing increasing damage, but that increase will get generally smaller, and you'll be doing smaller amounts of damage the more mobs you hit. So that basically is the AoE cap. And they've always been in the game, but now a large amount of them are being changed. And what's Blizzard's official policy on this? Well, let's have a look. So we've definitely heard a lot of feedback from players, Jeff from accounts who did Shrine of the Storm in April, that bursting down larger and larger pools has been an overly dominant tactic in much of the game. This is particularly evident in questing and dungeons, which has made it difficult for many classes to find a clear role. What clear roles in questing are you referring to here? As for the dungeon one, you design the dungeons, you design the mobs, you design the boss encounters. So if this is going to be something that is the path of least resistance, what is the most effective way of doing these things? You know, if you have a problem with it, then you need to change it. You don't just put an arbitrary cap on it and say, it's fixed. So yes, they seem to see a problem at the moment with large AoE pools. Now, last time I checked, Blizzard were responsible for actually tuning and fixing these AoE abilities, so, you know, that could have been a path they could have gone down. And also, you know, they want all of the classes and specs to all be able to do, you know, the similar amount and a bit of cleave and a bit of dotting here, and everyone hold hands and they skip off into the distance, and this is not how it works in the world of Warcraft. And if they played their game, they might have realised that. They go on to say that most players who are used to fighting 3 to 5 enemies at a time will notice very little difference with this approach. Okay, well, obviously. On the other hand, players who are accustomed to pulling 10 to 20 enemies at a time will experience longer, more threatening engagements. I get that they want to level the playing field. This is not the way to do it, though. I mean, DPS in general, when I bump into DPS, their primary concern is their damage and all the numbers flying up on the screen, and how, you know, that's what they get out of the game. They enjoy doing that. And so, you know, now taking a melee and it does a whirlwind and it only hits 5 targets instead of 8, even though there are 8 there, that's just not going to feel satisfying for them. And so you're going to turn a lot of people off their own DPS specs by taking this particular approach. But, you know, as bad as it is for DPS, it's not restricted to them. Tanks are getting this as well. We have 3 hard-capped AoE abilities at the moment. We have Rushing Jadewind and Spinning Crane Kick, both capped at 6 targets, and Faeline Stomp is at 5, although anecdotally I hear it's not working properly in the beta, and are we surprised? Keg Smash and Breath of Fire are squirted, so they, you know, you'll hit all of your targets, but they will do gradually less damage the more enemies you hit with it. And because our damage is low, you know, this has a lot of threat implications. It also means that, you know, you are likely to be forced to go and pulling continual small groups of 5 in every single dungeon just to make sure that you can maintain threat on all the mobs. Now, that is a major problem with this kind of game design, because it doesn't really give players an awful lot of freedom to do whatever the hell they want with their characters. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with letting them do that. You know, this whole meta-slavery thing is a result of, you know, Raider.io, which is a very useful tool. It's a result of Pug Mythic Plus and the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. Now, really, if this is all about the MDI and the big pulls there, you're talking about the top Mythic Plus players in the world being able to cheese your dungeons. And, you know, if you don't think that's a good look, then design the encounters better. It does feel like Mythic Plus in general is being punished as a direct result of your own design decisions. Feels like AoE cap should just be like another Mythic Plus affix, but for ranged, you know, call it foggy. Right? It's foggy, you can't really see it, so you can only really AoE 6 targets. It'll be the AoE equivalent of storming, because that is a beautiful new affix for melee. You know, truly, from a melee fan's heart, thank you very much for storming. But yeah, if they're worried about it, then you make class changes, you make AoE changes, you make skill and abilities, you make talents, you actually do your job. It's just the puggers really who are going to be affected by this, and they're going to get declined, and they're going to go onto the forums, and they're going to go, oh, you know, in BFI I was always accepted, now I'm being declined because I've got target caps all over me. And what will you do then, Blizzard? I suspect the knockback on this is going to bite you rather badly. You're going to get so much negative feedback from AoE target capping that you're just going to lift the restrictions. And we'll just chalk it down to yet another in a long line of bad design decisions from this development team. At the end of the day, this will not change anything. You know, you are basically changing the whole way that people play their classes, so they're not going to enjoy that to starters, and they're probably going to leave. Which is not a good idea when you're trying to do a follow-up to a basically failed expansion. And, you know, once you've gotten rid of this meta, here comes the new one. With the new classes and the new specs, and the new tanks that don't have AoE caps. For those of us who do, oh well, I guess that's too bad. Why don't you just spec statue? Why? Because I shouldn't have to spec statue in order to fix your own AoE target nonsense. That's why. And I prefer Ring of Peace. That's why. You know, historically in Warcraft, whenever they've restricted things like this, it has never ever been a good idea. The players have never ever appreciated it. There's always been a backlash. So I don't know why they would do this now and think that there's not going to be a storm. For those of us who are following this, we're trying to warn you this is a bad idea. When Shadowlands goes live and this gets implemented and people are wondering why they're not doing as much damage anymore, you have fun on the forums defending this policy. Anyway, I think that's enough from me. I will be back with hopefully some more beta patch updates on Thursday. But until then, I am the Conspicuous Moo, and a very good evening to you.